Oh, right. You know what it is. You know who it is. We are back with another episode of the BG Perform podcast. I'm going to pat myself on the back here to start this out. I've been studying for the last 3 months for the CSCS exam, which is the Certified Strength Conditioning Specialist exam, and I fucking passed. A week early, mind you. We don't have to get into the details about that, but I ended up having to take the test a week early and I passed. I think honestly it did me good because I cram studied for like 2 or 3 days and I found out on Tuesday like that I was going to have to take the test a little bit earlier than I was expecting. So I studied, cram studied, and we made it happen. So I was hyped, I was excited. I remember well when I was in there was at one point when so you're in a lecture room, right? Or it's like a computer room. It's a testing center for most of you. I don't know if you've ever taken a test like that, but you go to these testing centers and there's basically like desks you sit at with the computers. So I sat down, I did my first half of the test, and it asked you if you want to take a break in between, and I chose not to take the break. And for some reason, it just like signed me out of the computer. So I was like, all right. So I got up, I went to go see the person at the front desk, and I was like, hey, the computer signed me out, and he was like, oh, okay, cool. He's like, do you want to know the results of the first portion? And I was like, no. And I was like, please no. I was like, if you tell me and I fail, I'm gonna be pissed. So I was like, don't. So then I was coming out, I finished the second part, coming out, standing there. He was talking to somebody else and he hands the girl the test and he's like, oh, congratulations on passing your test. And it was a different test. Like no one's taking the same test in there. They're just kind of doing whatever. So then he looks at me and he goes, all right, Brandon. And I was like, yeah. He goes, all right, I just need you to sign out here, sign this. And I was like, fuck. I was like, what? And then he goes, all right, congrats on passing your test, both sections. I was like, let's go. Yeah.
You punch
Oh.
him in the face. I knew it.
So it was good. I'm happy I passed. I've been working on that for a while. Like I said, a little pat on the back here. And yeah, so today we're going to be talking about online coaching, right? I think that there's a lot that is spread out there in regards to online coaching. And Jerry and myself want to dive into this because we have experience. We both have online clients, we both have in-person clients, and I personally, the last couple of years, have only had one in-person client for the most part. I've had a couple like when I travel, but for the most part, it's been Ian. And I've only had outside of that like online clients. And I've really started to see how difficult it is to build an online business, one, and two, how what we're going to talk about here is like how in depth it is for you to actually be successful, right? And I think that in this process, we're gonna dive into a lot of the things that I think make online coaching very good and why I think it's needs to be, you know, thought of in a different light and how it compares to in-person training. So, um, yeah,
Yeah, same thing for me with where Brandon's been traveling with one in-person client for the most part and building his online stuff. I like moved to two different states in the past year. So like I built up my in-person stuff and then I was like, all right, well, I'm leaving, so I can't train them anymore in person. So transitioning them to online has been a journey in itself. So kind
I
of
think
like in the
even
same boat. We're just
I
both
think
having
even
to
for you
transition.
for that transition, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
you had you know, ideas in your head of what personal training is going to be online and like how that transitions, right? And
Yeah.
I'm going to start the clock right now. We're going to do 25-minute clock today. I'm going to start this so it gets going. But I think you as a coach, like you have to kind of see that and be like, okay, I'm making this transition and tell us, right? Like tell us what was that transition like? Because for me, it was really hard. I'll be honest. Like when I initially decided I was going to go full time with Ian, I had a pretty significant client base in Florida, and I had the thought of like, okay, I could try to just transition them, but you know, there was a lot that you just can't transition, right? And I think there's a lot that goes into this that it's like online coaching is thought of as this like idea of just like you just do it. right? And it's not different, and like there is no difference in regards to like how it's laid out and how people who do follow online coaching take it, or how they react to the being in that situation, right? So I think when I first had that transition, I thought about that right away. I was like, are these, is this going to be right? And what are going to be the positives and benefits, positives and negatives of both, right? And I think for me right away, in person is something where you're there. And it's just as simple as that. You're there, you see the person, you talk to the person each and every day. You can see them move, you can see them with the movements that they are doing, right? And the movements that you might need to tweak. You are seeing them with the weight jumps, how they handle it. If you're noticing little differences, little things, little tweaks, like you're there to see it, and it's like your coaching eye is there, and you're able to communicate with somebody, and you're able to really, you know, give them the best version of yourself, right? And I think why I love in-person coaching so much is because it's not just about the workouts. And I think that the workouts are very crucial, and I think they're important, but I also think that the in-person coaching allows you to see stuff in real time so you can tweak it, right? So when I had to make that initial transition, it was hard because I knew some of the people that I was with weren't going to make the transition well, and it was like the only option I had, and it was okay, how do we try to make this work? What are the things that I need to do that I can had from in person that I can transition online? And it was from there, right? And I think that Jerry, for example, like I want to hear your side of it too, because I think that you obviously had a client in this same, capacity, right? Like you were working with someone in person and then you transitioned them into online, and how you felt that transition was from being in with someone in person and then having to transition them online, and that, basically how you felt about it.
Yeah, it was very similar. I knew that I had some people who were going to transition really well, and they did seamlessly. Like from in person to online, they hit all their lifts. They were feeling really good. Their numbers were going up. I put in like specific exercises. I'll even if they feel like it's gonna be good, I'll write form check in all caps and I'll write send me a video on these. I want to make like this is what I want to see for sure, whether you think it's good or not. And they send me all the form checks from like multiple angles, and they do a really good job of that. The biggest transition or the biggest issue with the transition would be having people who were really, really good at in-person training in the sense that they would show up on time, they'd get the work done, they did the reps, the sets, the whole 9 yards. But then when we transitioned online, it was because there was no appointment with me and it was based on their own schedule, they didn't follow through.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things with that is you get used to having someone there. And I think a lot of people
Hmm.
forget that a lot of training, like personal training, is having someone there to just be with, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of people who, outside of the fitness, outside of the training, outside of that stuff, like they just want someone there because they have trouble getting to the gym, right? And I think a lot more people nowadays are aware of that they just have trouble getting to, like literally just getting to the gym and knowing someone stand. Like I had a client before who told me like the most important thing wasn't even training, it was just me being there, knowing like if I don't go and I don't wake up at 6 a.m., like I'm blowing you
Hmm.
off. And it's like that is what pisses me off. And he still did it. He still would show up. And it's like, all right, bro. Like,
It's
so
like, dude, this is what we're trying to work on. What are
yeah,
you doing?
literally. So it's just like, all right, bro, whatever. But I think it's just that aspect where people forget that a lot of training is the communication. A lot of it is, especially nowadays, like you see more and more in the fitness industry, what's taking off, right? Run clubs, get-togethers, outdoor events, working out outside, group fitness facilities, right? Like these are places where people meet, connect, build community, and that's what a lot of this stuff is about. Obviously, if you're like myself or like yourself, Jerry, like you like to work out by yourself, but when you understand and and that's like your specialty, right? That's what you do. It's easy, right? It's like
Hmm.
I don't know, I wouldn't go cook by myself because I'm not the best cook, right? Like I wouldn't go like build a whole meal by myself, and that's where it goes from there.
It's all accountability. That's one of the biggest things. I just signed a client in person on I met with them on Friday and their number one thing they said they need. They were like, I want to build and like get to my goals, but I just need someone to be there to help me do it. They're like, I won't go and do it. When I'm there, I'll get the work done, but I won't go and do it unless I have to meet somebody there.
Yeah, and I think, and just so I think cooking was a bad example because I do cook by myself. But like, there's probably some other example
I
that
cook cereal all
I
the
cook
time.
cereal, I cook milk, I
Pop
cook
Tarts, toaster
water.
strudels when I feel like being fancy.
But anyways, yeah, and I think like that is such a big piece of in-person training, and that is missed online, right?
Hmm.
And I think that some of the biggest differences I see in online and in person, like I said, is just literally the accountability, like Jerry just said, the eyes, like your eyes aren't there. And I think there's, I would say, I don't know, am I missing anything else? Any other big aspects that I would say, like online versus in person? I think those are two of the biggest, like having eyes on you and the accountability. I guess maybe like just the relationship in general, right? The
Hmm.
accountability of the gym, but like being able to connect with somebody. It's very, actually, yeah, that's another thing I always notice is like it's so much harder to keep a client when you don't see their face, right?
Hmm.
It's so much harder to build a relationship and keep someone coming back and progressing when you're not watching them or having those little conversations or seeing the change physically right there. Like you see it, it's like, wow, that first set was, or that third set was so much better than the first set, right? And giving that feedback to them is like very, very important. But I think also like there are a lot of benefits to online training. And I think some of the benefits to online training are there is no direct schedule, right? So as much as people do need that accountability, there is a subset of people out there who don't, and they have a crazy schedule or they just want to work out when they want to work out by themselves and they just want structure. And that's one of the beauties of online training. One of the beauties of online training is you don't have to, as a coach, right? You're dedicating an hour in personal training that isn't going anywhere else, right? In online training, you can dedicate multiple people like inside of an hour technically if you're giving out multiple workouts, right? And then one of the other things about online training that I think is super important to kind of realize and break down is that online training allows a different level of, how do I want to word this? Like I think creativity, but it also it forces you to be better as a coach, in my eyes, right? And we're gonna get
Hmm.
talk about this in a couple minutes, but it forces you to have to write those little details. It forces you to have to make sure everything is on point. It forces you to make sure that you have the right videos on your app, right? And this is why it's so important to have like Coach RX, for example, which I use or we use for our online clients, is because you need to have something that's tangible, right? That they can touch and use on their phone. You need to have something that tracks. You need to have something that has the videos where you can communicate, where you can write your notes. All of it needs to be in one section, right? And this is why, like,
Hmm.
personally, I think it's so important to have that piece because it gives you that feeling of like the guy is there in some capacity, right? Or the girl. But they are there in some capacity, allowing you to train while you're still kind of looking after them, right? And I think, to me, there's obviously clear differences in online training where it's like when you don't have those eyes, you have to rely on the other person, right? When you don't have those eyes, you have to rely that they're going to do the jumps right or and wait, or they're going to do the sets right, or they're going to notice that little feeling or that little tweak. And we have to be there and we don't have the eyes, so we can't see it.
With having the eyes there, and also it ties into like the accountability piece, it's the perceived effort. Because like even in person, I've had clients who will like let's say they're doing a squat and you could tell like there's like 3 or 4 reps in reserve and it's supposed to be a pretty close to max effort set. That's one of those things where you're like that bar was moving really quick at the end. Let's put some weight on. And they're like, but it felt heavy. And it's like it's always gonna feel heavy. It's a back squat, you know? So those little things where perceived effort, a lot of online clients uh will have the exercises there, but they probably won't have that extra push unless you write in the notes like, don't forget this is supposed to be heavy, push hard here.
Yeah, and I think I just had this conversation 2 days ago on Thursday,
Hmm.
3 days ago. My client was I always ask every client after the set. I'm usually like, how did that feel? And they're like, oh, felt okay. And I'm like, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, like 10 being the hardest, in the beginning I ask a lot because we're doing new movements, we're pushing the weight, and I'm trying to see like, where they're at. And you can also look like one of the things as you get to know people better, you can look at the facial expressions they make. If they're like, lifting and it's just like blank stare and they're like, oh,
Michael
that was an eight.
Myers.
It's probably like, all right, well, that probably wasn't an eight, right? And then you start to see them make that little face or, they're pushing it or you hear the little grunt or something like that. That's when you start to know like they're pushing it. But I had the conversation. And I was like, what was that on a scale of 1 to 10? And she was like, oh, probably an eight. And I was like, okay. And she was like, why? And I was like, oh, well, I was just asking to see like what you think the set's at. And she was like, oh, well, it's kind of hard because like it's heavy and like I feel it. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I was basically like, every time you tell me a number, I usually go like two under. And that's what I would take it as in regards to what you're feeling. But I want to ask you so you get to kind of understand like what that actually feels like and what an eight actually feels like versus what a six actually feels like, right? So I think it's really important that you have that conversation and you build autonomy inside the client, right? And this is something we're going to talk about as well. But you build autonomy inside the client so that they're not just like, oh my God, if Brandon's not here, I can't make a decision. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. How am I going to jump? And, I don't know how that felt. Like, it felt, like I used to tell you about my old client. I'm not going to say his name, but at Thrive, the guy who I asked, I used to be like, how'd that feel? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, where did you feel it? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? I'm like, we just squatted. Did you feel it in your legs? He's like, I guess. And I'm like, bro, I'm like, can you give me something? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay. Like, I'm like, all right, well, we'll just keep
Good
going.
talk.
Remember, he's a, I don't know if I ever said this before, but one time he got me a box for Christmas, like a legit box, like one of those wooden boxes with like the slide out top.
Yeah.
Christmas, he comes in, he's like, here, I got this for you. I was like, thanks. He's like, put something in it. I was like, okay. I was
Is
like,
that what I do with a box?
I was like, all right, cool. And it was like, wasn't like it was like this long and it
Yeah.
had like just a slide off top. Like you really couldn't fit maybe like some
Uh,
pencils and shit.
Maybe a necklace.
Crazy. But yeah, so like that's an important conversation you want to have with people. And I think that like one of the things that I struggle with as a coach is when I see people talk about how online coaching is like free money, right? It's the worst. It's like
Are you a personal trainer in the fitness industry? Are you trying to make $10 million a month?
yeah, like that's always the catch. But personal, if you want to do it the right way, online coaching is not free money, right? Like in my eyes, if you're a great in-person coach and you want to transition online, then one, you either have to build such a stellar, in-depth, progressive program like we have, right? With Transcend or the Fight Camp program or Dinner Party. What else do we have? We have
Did you say weight loss program?
Oh, the weight
Did
loss
I?
program. No,
Yeah.
yeah. So the weight loss program, like we have programs that we have built because we have that piece in person. We know what people online are going to be lacking, and we've built that inside of the program. But most people who don't have the in-person experience go into online and like, oh, well, this is easy. I'm just going to put out a program and everyone's going to buy it, and then everyone's going to do it, and I'm going to make a lot of money, and I can coach from the beach, and I can coach from anywhere in the world.
I can
And
coach from your mom's bedroom.
it's like, and it it's crazy because like coach coaches unfortunately get sold a lie in a lot of ways that it's
Yeah.
just that easy and it can happen. And I don't want to say it doesn't happen because it definitely can happen. It's just that to me, when you aren't there in person, there's so much more that goes into the online space that you have to be aware of that you can't ignore it, right? Like you have to be asking way more questions. You have to be asking for videos. You have to rely on somebody to make sure that they're feeling the things that you would normally see with the coach's eye. You have to make sure that all of these things are accountable and that you're able to then rely on them to give you that product.
We've talked a lot too about like if in person or online coaching is for you. From the coach's side, when you're looking at, I've talked to a lot of new coaches because I've worked in gyms that are like bigger box gyms and they have like the cheap personal training, that type of thing. And I was easily when I was there, I was like one of the most tenured trainers, not only in that facility, but because I've been doing it for a while. And every time I asked, like, oh, so why'd you want to become a coach to a new coach? They were like, well, I've always loved fitness. I love my fitness journey. Fitness was never easy for me. Kind of like the similar answers you get from any coach. And they're like, cool. What do you want to do like in the industry? Like, what's your goal? They're like, well, I really want to get online coaching in. I'm like, they saw an ad for that. Are you a personal trainer? You want to make $100,000 a month?
So,
So, my biggest piece of advice, is you probably shouldn't be touching online training until you have, I don't even know how many hours we would recommend in
I
person.
would say you want like you want to have a couple years of
Yeah, I
in-person.
was gonna say a few years at least.
Yeah, I would say maybe like honestly a good standard would probably be 3 years. Like three
Yeah,
full-time years of coaching. I'm talking like 60 hours a week type shit, right? Like
yeah.
in there, in group training and personal training and semi-private, whatever it is, just have your hands, like your feet on the ground. Like I often hear it described as like boots on the ground, right? Like be
Hmm.
in the lab, be in the gym. Because I think there's, this is another thing, right? Is like if you're a coach who hasn't trained someone in person, you have no business training someone online. Like with
That's exactly, yes,
and
yes.
it's as simple as that. It's like if you're an online coach and you think and you have never trained someone in person and you have the balls to tell anybody that you can train someone online, it's just absurd. It's absurd because you have no understanding of how different it is and the things you actually need to be successful inside the gym.
The one of the biggest reasons for this, you're working with a client online. You say, "Yeah, let me know how that day goes. Let me know whatever." They text you, they say, "Yeah, I'm having this really weird feeling when I do split squats and I'm feeling it here." And it's like, "Okay, I've seen this before in person. I know exactly how they're placing their feet." Like for an example, let's say they're doing like a hip lift, right? A single leg like hip lift with their back on a bench. And during this hip lift, they feel some pain like in their knee. And they're like, I don't know, I'm just feeling it in my knee. And it's like, all right, why don't you try to just push through your heel, lift your toe up? Chances are you're probably like digging your toe forward, which is putting a lot of emphasis on the quad. Bringing your toe up is going to put a little more emphasis on like hammy and glute. Instantly, they're like, oh, that worked. You don't just know those things because you know them. It's from seeing the same shit day after day. And that's where we say it all the time. A lot of programs are going to be like 85 to 90% the same across the board with little tweaks and individualization across like little exercises here and there. But the human body for everybody, it moves the same way for the most part. It has the same issues. Everybody has the same habits. And when you see these things in person, you know how to fix it online because you have the experience of doing it in person.
I think you need it. Like I think without it, like you're doing the people online a disservice because
Hmm.
and at the bare minimum, right? Like even at the bare minimum, you better be working out. Like you better have gone through the program because I think another thing is like even I've seen this early in my career was like I put together programs and then I went to the gym to do it and I was like, oh wait, this doesn't make sense. Or like,
Hmm.
oh wait, the superset doesn't make sense in this gym because the hamstring curl is fucking, all the way across the gym and then the other machine is like all the way across the gym and you can't take both, right?
Hmm.
If they're next to each other, it's a different story. But like when you understand the layout of the gym, what is courteous about using a gym, what supersets make sense, how the layout of the gym is, in general, right? Versus like a specific gym. But you need this stuff, right? And I think when people get confused is that they think online coaching is free money because they can coach from wherever and they don't have to put in as much work. But in my eyes, it's at least in the beginning, right? At least as you start to build autonomy in these people it's a lot more work. You have to check in. You have to make sure they're sending you videos. You have to make sure the notes are correct. You have to make sure that the supersets are making sense. You have to make sure that the in-person or the lack of in-person is made up by constant communication, whether it's through text or call, and making sure that they're doing the movements right and making sure that you're checking in like that type of thing. Like to me, it's so much more involved when you're not with someone because that hour conversation that you're with them, you see everything, right? When you're not with them, it's like, hey, my knees bother me. It's like, okay, cool. You have to ask the question is like, well, when did it start hurting? Was it after the workout? Was it during the workout? What movement was it? Well, I felt it on, like you said, a hip lift. It's like, okay, cool. What did you feel on the hip lift, right? Did you take a video? I just didn't, well, I don't like taking videos in the gym. Okay, cool. So like now you have to kind of communicate throughout it without knowing or seeing the movement. And you have to ask the right questions. And that, like Jerry just explained, like that takes having experience in the gym to see it, right? And I think one of the things that, you know, is like how do I know if someone is the right fit for online coaching? And how do I know if someone is a better fit for in-person coaching, right? And as coaches, it's really hard. And I think we all want to grow our business and make money, but we have to be smart if we're going to raise the standard in this industry, right? And if someone's not a fit for online coaching, we have to be honest and refer them to somebody who's in person, right? And it's the same fit, like, or it's the same thing. Well, it's not the same thing, but like for in-person coaching, it is a different scenario because you want someone to be there and you want someone to be involved in it. Why are you smiling?
I'm trying to hold it back. I'm sorry.
Why?
You're just mid-sentence, and you have to. Why are you smiling? I'll tell the story after we finish the. It'll be a good way to cap it off.
Okay. Uh, so, you want to be honest about who you're working with and if they're the right fit, because online coaching does require a certain sense of autonomy. It
Mhm,
requires a certain sense of understanding movement. It requires a sense of understanding how to communicate when you're not with somebody, right? And there's a lot that goes into that. You can't just sit there and say, online coaching is freedom for me. So like everybody has to fit into it, right? Because that's not the case for most people. And if
mhm,
you try to force someone into that bubble, like I've had to in the past, it doesn't work, right? And I've had some great clients that were in person that ended up not really working out online, which sucks because they're great people. But it's just the online space is just not for them. They want someone there. They want someone to communicate with. They want someone to just be there and just do everything outside of the actual lifting for them, right?
mhm,
And that's important. And when you look at these clients, you have to ask yourself, like, and there's a couple ways to go about this. You have to either ask, like, is this person the right fit for online? And can I mold this person to be the right fit or for online, right? Because there are some people who just need a little bit of teaching and they're going to be a great fit for online, right? And personally, as I've done training more and more, I think most people after about 3 to 6 months are probably good to go online for themselves.
mhm,
But again, some people just like having someone there in person. But if you're a good coach and you're teaching them, then a lot of these people, once they learn the weight room, once they learn how to, basically track their rest and abide by their rest, once they learn how to control the movement patterns and put and take off weight and control the read the sets and reps. What else am I missing here? Like the jumps, right? Understanding how to jump, like put your weights forward for the jumps. There's really nothing else to it, right? And then you communicate consistently, you take videos, and you can really mold someone who like probably wasn't going to be a good fit in the beginning to be a really good fit online, right? And that's what I've started doing with some people is like, hey, listen, because I travel, because of everything going on, I'm going to be straight up and honest with you. Like we want to get better at this, and I want to teach you so that you can do this somewhat autonomously when I am not here and things don't, fall off, right? But on the flip side of that, there might just be people who like, and it's plain and simple. Like if someone's the right fit for in-person coaching, they just want you there, right? And you have to be honest with that. And you can't try to fit them into it or force them to do it because it's just not the same. It really is not the same. And I think that for most people, like that is the most important thing is just like, where's my accountability coming from? Am I able to keep myself accountable? Am I able to show up even when it's hard? Am I able to show up when no one's there waiting for me? And some people just aren't, right? And I think it's really important for us as coaches to realize that online coaching is a great thing because we can reach more people. We can get our programs out there. We can get to people that we otherwise wouldn't have gotten to in the first place, right? But in the same breath, it's just not for everybody, right? And it's not ever going to be for some people. And we as coaches again have to understand that until there's something that allows us to be in 6 rooms at once, like Star Wars holograms or whatever. But outside of
Can't
that,
wait for that day, dude. Give me a lightsaber too.
like until that happens, we're not like we have to be realistic about what works in person and what works online and why online training isn't just this end all be all like make your life amazing and now you can just go coach from a beach.
Yeah,
So
that's.
tell us the story. You got me
Well,
sitting here thinking about what you're telling me.
I was gonna ask you too, like what the just for a little fun at the
Hold
end,
on,
what the
hold on, I'm about to
worst
go off.
and for the 86th annual Hunger Games.
What were you gonna ask me?
What'd you say? I'm sorry.
Are you gonna ask me?
I like it because I know my worst experience with online coaching, somebody reaching out, and I would like I'm gonna share that experience, and then if you have one, I would
Oh
like to hear
geez, I
yours.
remember that. But
Yeah, because
um I,
I was
I
gonna say
I would say
what?
like my worst. I know your story, so I'm gonna let you
Yeah.
say. But I would say my worst was somebody who reached out to me about training him and his wife, and
Mm,
it was. it was difficult because they were physically impaired and they wanted me to help, but they weren't able to go to a gym. Like they couldn't afford to go to a gym. And this was when I was just starting out. So like I was just starting out and I couldn't, I had to basically create a program that worked inside of their apartment for both of them. And they were both kind of like, you know, had a physical impairment and they wouldn't communicate. They would sometimes do the workouts, sometimes wouldn't. And it was just a like really bad online experience. And I realized, and this was when I had just left Thrive. So this was like 2018, or no, it's 2020, like during COVID of 2019. So it was just like and it was my first time being online and there was a lot of mistakes I made and there was like I was just starting to use like True Coach at the time and I was getting used to it and I just didn't like it's just not a good experience for me and I was from that experience that you know really forced me to be like, all right, well, how do I make this better? Because this is hard. One, because during COVID, I think that like shook up the thing for everybody, right? And eventually you're just kind of like, all right, how do I transition what I was doing in person to online? But I think a lot of people tried to take advantage of that situation and they lied, or they put out programs that just weren't that good and they were like, oh,
Mhm.
it's individualized training, and it really wasn't. Or it was like, hey, this is, a program that I built from the ground up, blah, blah, blah. And it was just, kind of made up on the spot type thing. And I think, COVID really COVID really introduced us to like where online training could go, but also introduced us to all the negatives of it, where it's like everybody transitioned online at once.
Mhm.
Everybody had an online program. Everybody had, some type of online training and it was just like the gym and, bring the gym into your house, blah, blah, blah. And it was just a lot, right? And I think a lot of people bit on it at first because they didn't have an option. And then once we came back into it, it just kind of got sold into this thing where it's like, oh, you can coach from the beach, right? And it's like it's the simplest thing. You just write your workout, your clients open the app, they do the app, and everything's a fairy tale ending, right? And this is not the case. And that's the biggest thing I want you guys to take away is that like it's just not the case. But story, go ahead.
Dude, it's funny. I have two. I have two that I'll tell the first one quick and then I'll give you some detail on the second one. Give
Let's,
me
let's
two.
if
What'd
there's
you
any
say?
vulgarity, let's because I think I remember the one, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's gonna be something
keep it a
different. So
little bit simple. But
yeah, the what was the give me like two random male names.
Jason and Scott.
Jason and Scott. All right. Jason reached out and wanted individualized training remote. At the time, dude, I was all in because it was COVID. I made a fucking slideshow. I made a slideshow on like PowerPoint.
That's
And
that's
I was taking him through it and I was like, so we're gonna have this. This is gonna be what it's like. It's for this much a month. This is what it includes. And he was like, that sounds great. I was like, all right, so are you prepared to move through these motions like alone without me there? And he was like, yes. This guy, as soon as like day one, he was like, this is awful. You're not even here. And I was like, what do you mean I'm not there? He goes, I thought you were gonna show up. I'd be like, one, I don't have your address. And two, I was like, and two, I told you what this was. Like, why would you think I'm gonna be at your house? And dude, he was screaming at me on the phone, and I was like, "Listen, man, this isn't gonna be a good fit. I'll refund you your money, but this is done. We're not doing this anymore."
Jesus. Oh, maybe I don't remember the story.
Yeah, so that's Jason, and then you said the second name was Scott.
Yeah.
Second name. So Scott reaches out and he goes, "I'm from Ohio."
Oh, this is the one I was thinking of.
Yeah. He goes, I'm a smoker, no offense, and I'm a nudist, no offense. And that's exactly what it sounded like. And I was like, how's that gonna offend me? I'm not even near you. Um, and I was like, all right, well, this is what you'll need for our call. We're gonna go over goals, and then we're gonna also go through like movement assessment. So you're gonna need active wear as well as sneakers. And he was like, well, I am a nudist, so the most I could do is a jock strap. And I was like, listen, bud, like I'm gonna need you. I was like, I kept it as professional as possible, and I was like, to to I was like, I cannot, as a professional in this field, put you in a vulnerable position like that. So I, for myself and for you, need you to wear at least shorts and a shirt. I was like, if you want to keep your shoes off, that's fine. And he was like, I just can't believe you don't accept my lifestyle. And I was like, oh my God, here we go. So I was like, hey man, like I'm so sorry. I don't know if this is going to be a great opportunity, but I found this gym in your area that has trainers for pretty cheap if you want to check that out. And I left it at that. But when he said, I'm a smoker, no offense, and I'm a nudist, no offense, I was like, okay, whatever. But then he pulled out the jock strap line, and I was like, I'm not training you, dude. Like, no. But like, you do you. I accept
Did
your
he reach out? Did
lifestyle.
that guy reach out again?
He reached out, and then when I told him like I'd like for you to this is when I was like new at coaching too. So I was like eager to work with people. So I gave him a second chance. He was like, I apologize. Sometimes I like lose it a little bit. I'd be happy to wear some clothing. And I was like, cool. And then he started yelling at me about random stuff I had nothing to do with. And he was like, he messaged me at 4 a.m. He was like, hey coach, how are you today? And I was like, hey man, what's up? I know we're scheduled for Friday. Did you need something? And he was like, I'm sorry, I want a personal relationship. And I was like, oh, well, shit, I didn't know it was going there. So, just be careful.
Yeah, be careful too, I
Be
guess.
careful, especially like even men, but women in the online space, just careful. There's
Yeah.
a lot of strangers out there.
But I
I'll
think I
say
think
that.
this is the biggest thing, like to kind of like wrap this up. I think online coaching is kind of taught as this like escape, right? And it's like this
Hmm.
get out of the everyday coaching industry with online coaching. And I think it can be done. Like honest to God,
Yeah.
I think it can be done. I think, if you want to do it in the right way, you need to find how much of that in person you have and bring that into it as much as you can, right? So the communication, the check-ins, the movement analysis, the note taking, right? The sets and the reps, the making sure that as much as you can inside of like a nice packaged product like Coach RX that we use, it makes it easy, right? Because it's kind of like a platform that gives you everything. But the biggest thing is just taking as much as you can from that in person and giving it into the online space. And once you have enough, again, experience online or in person, right? And if you don't have experience in person, that's step one. Go get experience in person. But if you're just transitioning into the online space, like you have to understand what are the things that make in-person training so special, right? And when you do, then you can implement that into the programs, and that creates a very good autonomous way for someone to train without having to rely on you, right?
Hmm.
Because I think that like again, online coaching can be a great thing for coaches who want to spread their programming more and make a bigger difference and impact, but it's again there's obstacles that get in the way that you otherwise would avoid had you been there in person and watching, and you just have to be careful for that, right? Especially with like waivers, making sure that people take care of themselves, because it's very simple that you put a workout up there that you didn't really think was a big deal, they hurt themselves, and then it's they were following your program while you weren't there to watch, and it could have been it can turn into a whole thing, right? And it's just you want to be careful. You want to make sure the stuff that you're putting out there, you've tested and tried, or you've at least seen someone do. And that's it. And it's not to say that, like, again, you can't be a great online coach. It's just saying that it is a lot harder than you think to build an online base. And, there's a way you can do it in the short term, right? You can kind of just lie or you can put something together, but most of those things don't really work out long term, right? And we're just, that's it. If you want to build a real successful business online, and I wouldn't say that I have, I would say that I've been able to maintain a very good online business right now because I don't want to just go the route of just random stuff. Like I want, even the group I have like a group of amateurs from Ireland, and even with them, it's like it's very individualized to their gym, right? I built a general program for the guys because they don't have a lot of money, and I built a program for them based around their training schedule, when they spar, when their days off are, what the gym looks like. I actually went to Belfast to visit the gym to see Paul, so it's like that's the type of detail I'm talking about, right? Like obviously you don't have to do that for every single person, but it's like if you have an opportunity to visit an actual gym that you're going to have clients training at, why not? Then you can see the layout. Then you can see the way it's structured. You can see the gym. But for the most part, even outside of that, it's just communication. Make sure they're doing everything movement wise. Make sure you're putting yourself in their shoes and understanding that, like, if they're going to be doing this workout, what are the things that they need from me to be successful? Right. And that's it. Um, Thoughts?
That's it. Yeah,
Cool.
that was a really good recap.
Yeah. I hope you guys, enjoy that episode. If you are a coach, I think this is a really important thing to think about. And if you're not, if you're a client, and you want to understand that better, I think these are really important things to think about as well. Like, do you have autonomy? Do you feel like you can, because, another thing to add on top of that, online coaching is usually way cheaper than in-person coaching. And that's another thing where people, see the benefit. They're like, okay, I don't have to pay as much, right? And if that's something that's affecting you, you know, then look at it and think about those things. Like, do I have the things that I think I need to be a great online client and get the benefits of online training, right? And if not, then you need to invest in having someone there to make sure that you're good, you know. But I appreciate you guys for tuning in as always, and I hope you guys enjoyed, got what you needed out of it. And I think, like I said, it's I don't want to say it's a slippery slope, but like it's something that's important to talk about as a coach. And if you guys have any other questions about that, reach out. And we will see you guys next time. Peace. Uh-oh.
You did it again.